We'll start class. Hey, and right. All right. So my goal for today, I'm using Shoden no Kata as sort of a backdrop as opposed to really focusing on the kata itself. And I wanted today to talk about some of the sword cuts that are in Shoden no Kata. So I've asked Beavis to come here today to be my model so that you can see me, the angles that I'm talking about on that person. And just remember that this is going to be on YouTube. And so you can go back and look at it again later if you want to try to grasp something that you missed. And the other thing that I want to say about YouTube is just always remember that because it's on YouTube does not make it definitive. Because it's in a video does not make it definitive. So just remember when you're looking at stuff that it's where I was today. It's the things that I'm enjoying practicing for myself. And I might change my mind, or somebody else may come along and say, well, actually, that's not correct. And it really should be this way. So just have fun with everything and get what you can from it. And that's all we're here for. So one of the cuts that we do in Shoden no Kata is a horizontal cut. So a horizontal cut is just literally cutting across just below the rib cage. Do that. I'm not going to get too much into the details of how to specifically hold your sword and the idea that your hand is coming first. There's a lot of detail in here. I really just want to get to the movement and how it feels in our body. So one is a horizontal cut or Shoden. Another is we have two diagonal cuts or that come across the body. One of them is kirikomi and the other is kiharai. Kiharai is cutting by pulling. So in that, I'm entering here and I'm cutting across at this angle. So it's from the neck down to the hip. That's where my sword would be cutting. So think of your own body when you're doing the cut. It's coming from your own shoulder to your own hip. All right. So another one of the cuts that we're going to do is kirikomi, which is cutting by pushing. And so when I do that cut, I'm here, and then I have to push forward. And we're going to go into some more detail on that in a minute, but I just want you to understand that the location where we're aiming is the neck. So then the last cut that we're going to practice is cutting up, gedan, and that's coming up, and it's the exact opposite of kiriharai, which is cutting down by pulling. We're cutting up by pulling. So we're going to cut up through. So those are the three cuts. Well, I want to start with just feeling the difference between cutting with our muscles and cutting with our extension. When I'm cutting, I want to feel an extension. If I bend my elbows when I cut, I'm using muscle, okay? I want to reach out. I want to extend what I'm doing. So when you're cutting, empty hand is the hardest one for me. When I have a sword in my hand, it's very easy for me to have extension through, whether it's a wooden sword or a metal sword, through the sword. It's very easy for me to find that extension. Empty hand, I actually find empty hand to be very difficult to find that far away extension. So I like to practice empty hand because I have a hard time with it. So the first thing that I want to practice, I'm going to leave you right there for the moment. You can practice with us, but okay. I might still want to borrow you. So the first thing that I want us to practice is just exploring the difference between what it feels like to kind of use muscle versus using more extension. So I don't care so much that you have a good angle to your cut. I just don't want you to come straight down because you'll hit your own body and that won't feel good. So when you're doing this cut, I want you to just have a sense of reaching out. So here, in order to do this, I don't want to bend my elbows. So what I want us to practice first really is to do this by bending my elbows on purpose. So if I lift my hands up and I bend my elbows, again, quite far because I want to exaggerate it. And then I try cutting. I can really feel how there's a lot of muscle in what I'm doing. I really have to use muscle to get my hands where I want them to be. Now I want to reach up and this time extend out. So as you're cutting, you're really cutting way far away, way far away. And then you're cutting through the ground, not with your physical sword, but with your intention. You're cutting. So I'm reaching way far away and way into the ground. How does that feel different than if I bend my elbows? So play with it, bend your elbows sometimes, don't bend your elbows, and just see if you can find the difference between extending forward and using muscle. And if your shoulders get tired, then take a break. So that's the first thing that I want to try to express is that when you're cutting, it's really out there. I'm not cutting in close. So really practice that sense of extending out when you cut, extending past. All right. So kitty harai, cutting by pulling. I don't have to move forward to cut by pulling. I step, but that's the end of my moving forward. Kitty komi is cutting by pushing. How do I do that? I've struggled with this myself, and I have a real tendency when I'm practicing, particularly empty hand, is that I cut and I do this very weird thing where I cut down and then I push forward. What I really want to, what I've discovered is that part of what's happening in order to move my center, when I cut, I slide forward just a hair. So my back foot is going to slide forward just an inch or two. Not all the way, just an inch or two. And that's what's going to get me cutting by pushing. So I'm still coming down, straight arms, I'm extending through, and then I'm extending straight forward from that point. So I'm cutting through and extending forward. Other side, cutting and extending forward. Let's just play with both of those two cuts. I want to play with cutting by pulling. So I want extension up, extending out, extension up, extending out. So this is what we did last time when we were talking about weight transfer. So as I'm doing this, I'm transferring my weight. My hands come up when my feet are together, and I'm transferring my weight. If you have the room, I highly suggest taking a few steps so that you can transfer your weight forward, come up, feet together, and transfer your weight forward. And so just feel that extension out away from your body as you're cutting through. So practice that version first. So you're just going to extend through. Feet together, hands are up. Feet together, hands are up. When I cut, at the end of my cut, my weight is basically 50-50. As my hands come up, I really don't want to have weight on this foot that I'm going to step forward with. Then I'm going to transfer my weight to that foot and I'll be 50-50 again. Okay, so as I come up, I'm basically 100% on one foot, and then as I cut forward, I transfer my weight so that I'm 50-50. Then I bring my weight up and I transfer my weight forward. So I don't want to fall forward, and I want to get away from the habit of actually putting weight on that foot, because in the big picture where we're headed is to be able to cut and cut and cut, but always to have the cut come coming from the apex of our hands as high up as they can be, cutting down. We get into this habit where we cut and step, or we step and cut. I'm trying to break that habit. So what I want from you is to try to find where you can have your weight coming forward with your step. So that is basically kiri harai. We're cutting by pulling. Now let's practice cutting by pushing, kiri komi. When I come down, I'm coming to the nape of the neck, but then I'm going to push through. So when I take that movement, I don't want to bring my feet together. We're not doing Masubadachi step. We're basically doing Fudodachi with a little bit of a forward movement. That allows me to feel what it feels like for my center to move forward, which is what we're doing when we're cutting by pushing. So just have that sense of cutting by pushing. And again, I don't want to bend my elbows. It's very straight feeling. So it's just an inch or 2 inches of your back foot coming forward before you reset for your next one where your feet do come together. For me, that has been the hardest cut for me to understand. And as soon as I started moving, allowing my back foot to not get planted and it can slide forward, it really helped my center move forward. And then I understood cutting by pushing. Otherwise, you just arrive at the neck and nothing's happening. So, and that's one of the difficulties in practicing sword is that we have to kind of talk about using the sword to hurt somebody in order to understand how to use the sword not to hurt somebody. So yeah, it's nasty to think about, but we kind of have to spend a minute or two thinking about it so that we can appreciate what our intention is, and then what our intention is, how we've shifted it, because I don't want to hurt somebody, but I want to help free them. So if I'm doing more of a kukajio, I'm really in that space of helping somebody free themselves. When I'm doing more jisen, then I'm doing more paired practice that is a little bit more martial quality to it. So that's kind of the difference that we're exploring. But all of these cuts that we're practicing right now are in Shoden no Kata. So then that's really what I'm focusing on, is just the cuts in Shoden no Kata, just to give us a frame, a piece of a framework. So that's pretty good for the cutting. Actually, we'll do the last one. So the last cut that we haven't practiced yet is Gedan cut. And Gedan is exactly the opposite of coming down. Instead of coming from the shoulder to the hip, I'm now going from the hip up to the shoulder. And one way to think about this, Ito Sensei was explaining it to me at one point, and I really liked what he said. We remember that the little finger side of our hand is the cutting side of our arm. So when I do Gedan, I want to come up through that person, and then I want to arrive at the top, and now I want to cut behind me in order to reset my sword. So I'm making a circle. That cut is in a flat, more or less circle around me. We have a tendency to come out of that, and then our hands become flat. And I don't know if you can see my hands. We come up and we tend to twist our hands as they come around. Really focus on keeping your little finger active through the whole movement. So I'm coming up. My finger now is pointing behind me. Now my finger is pointing down, and then it's coming at the side of me, and it's already ready to go on the other side, pointing in front, pointing behind, and pointing down. In some sense, I'm cutting the future. I'm cutting away into the future, and then I'm cutting the past and allowing that to come forward with me into the future. So think of that circle
I have a question on foot weighting here. When I'm
Okay.
going forward, it's easy to keep all the weight sort of on the on one foot. But when I go in the back plane, the weight kind of shifts on the back foot for me right now. What
Let's see.
what should you be feeling about where your body weight is on your feet?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, and I had not pre-thought about it, so I'll explore it right now with you. Basically, you're right, because here, as I'm ready, getting ready for my cut, in some sense, that's where I'm 100% on one foot, whichever side you're cutting. Then, as I'm cutting up, my weight shifts forward, and then, oops, wrong foot, sorry. As that weight comes up and shifts forward, then yes, I do kind of have to. I am kind of 50-50. And as I'm cutting back, I don't want to go 100% back. But having a little bit of a weight transfer behind me to keep my balance, but don't overdo it. So, yeah. At the end is where I'm going to end up being 100% on one foot because I'm ready for my next step forward. But you're right, in this part of it, I'm not moving my feet yet. I don't transfer my weight forward for the 100% till the very end of the cut. So I transfer forward, coming around at the end of the cut. And in some sense, it's almost like my sword is pushing my feet together. And then I'm ready for my next step. That makes sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
So my sword is on the left, my weight is on the left. Yeah, that makes much more sense. Sorry, everybody. So from here, as I transfer to my right foot, the cut is happening in the transfer. Once I clear the shoulder, I'm not cutting anymore. Now I'm just cutting space. Here I'm cutting my opponent. Once I cut through my opponent, now I'm just moving my sword around. In some sense, now I'm cutting through space. I've cut through the future. I'm cutting into the present, and then I'm cutting into the past. And as the sword comes down, my feet come together, and I'm ready for my next cut.
So I'll ask a clarifying question there, and I can see what you're doing, but I had a tendency to kind of do a follow through up with my feet together.
Right. If you do that, you're going to fall over.
Okay. So
Actually, do that with a sword. When you do this with an actual sword and an actual cut, you will fall down because all of your momentum is going forward.
okay.
So it's okay for my back foot to come a little bit forward so that I can get, again, it's the same idea here where I need to use my back foot to get a little bit of forward, but don't bring them together. So just a little bit. They don't come together till the end. Make sense? Good.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you can do this two ways with your same side foot and hand moving together, or your opposite foot and
You want to always protect your own forward foot. So if you, just like, if I go the reverse direction, it's a lot easier to see. When I'm cutting down, when I'm doing a Shoden cut, I'm cutting to where my foot isn't. So if I cut this way, I very likely will cut my own foot. So when I cut down, I'm cutting to where my foot isn't. When I'm cutting up, I'm also cutting to where my foot isn't. Oh, so I had it right the first time. Okay. Yeah, see, if I overthink it, I always do it backwards. When I just do it, it works. Yeah. Okay. So cut where your foot isn't. So if I cut through here, I'm going to cut my own foot. So if I step, if my weight is on my left foot and I'm stepping with my right foot, there's a really good chance I'm going to cut my own foot. Because remember, the sword is in this plane, it's only this, the angle is only right here. So, and that sword is quite long, right? So if I do this, there's a good chance I'm gonna cut myself. Well, that's gonna end the battle right there, right? So I want, when I step, to step so that I'm not interfering with that, and I can't do a full circle in here because I'll hit the ceiling. But that's the idea. So when in doubt, don't cut yourself. And that will answer the question. Just like anything, there are always exceptions to the rule, but in a very basic sense, just don't cut yourself. Okay, but let's play a little bit with the beginning of Shoden no Kata. So right now, let's just practice what our feet are doing. So a little bit of review of what we did last class. And the idea is that I need to turn, I'm facing forward, and I need to turn and face 90 degrees to my own right. So from forward, I'm going to take my right foot, turn it out, bring my left foot, again, this is where I'm 100% because I haven't cut yet, and then I'm coming forward for my cut. Then I'm coming back 100%, putting my left foot down and turning my right foot back to the front. Let's just play with that part of the movement first. And it will be more obvious when we include the sword sense to it. But for now, we're just shifting our weight so we can turn our right foot. Coming up, 100% of my weight is on the right. And then I'm stepping forward and I'm 50-50. Then I'm bringing my left foot back. I'm 100% on my right foot. And I'm stepping out and facing forward again. So one more time. Right foot turns out. Come up, don't step, don't put weight down there. And then step forward onto my left foot. Coming back. Turning back to the front, facing forward. Okay, we're going to do that again, only this time we're going to go the other direction. So now I'm going to go to the left, so I'm going to switch and turn my left foot facing out. Come up, all of my weight's on my left foot, and step through. Step back, all of my weight's on my left foot. Now I'm 50-50. And of course, I have to adjust my weight so that I can turn my feet, but basically I'm 50-50 at the end. So I'm basically turning my foot out to the right, come up, step through, coming back, and forward. Then I'm going to turn my left side, coming up, step through, coming back, and facing forward again. So just do that much for right now. So turn to the right, 100%, 50-50, left foot forward. 100% on the right, coming back to forward, turning to the left, 100% and 50-50. 100% coming back to the front. So just do that right now. All right, so now let's just really complicate things, and we're going to have sword hands. So the first cut in Shoden no Kata is a horizontal cut. I like to think of the first cut not so much that I'm actually cutting my opponent, but I'm telling them to back up. I'm saying, I'm here and I want to make space. So my first cut is a one-handed cut if I'm actually doing this with Boken. So I'm just going to use my right hand as I step forward. My intention is to send my energy all the way out around me. Then as my feet come together, my hands come together over my head. Now I'm going to cut, as I step, I'm going to cut through. As my feet come back together, my hands are going to get ready. Now I'm going to do the same type of a movement to the other side. So I'm coming across the front, and then I'm cutting. My feet come together, my hands are over my head, I cut. Now for this right now, we're just gonna keep going back and forth. So I'm just gonna keep going. I'm 50-50 at a cut. All right, now I'm 100%, but I'm getting ready for my next cut, which is horizontal. And cutting. So just play with back and forth. Try to find the timing so that your cut is with your step. Great. All right, well, we're just about at the end now, so why don't we call that a class? And thank you very much, everybody.